Hello, and welcome to It's Already In You podcast. We are your hosts, Liz
and Janine, nutrition and movement experts, mothers and business owners, obsessed with helping you quiet the noise of diet culture.
Seeing through the false advertising and promises of our food and fitness industries, helping you discover that everything you need to upgrade your health and well-being is already in you.
Hey everyone, welcome back. We're here today with Shannan Hanson. Shannan started a community meetup for women in midlife, particularly women that are in perimenopause, menopause. I've been a speaker at that space, and it has been such a welcomed, loved space for women for now almost a year. Close to a year. Shannan basically has changed her path from being in the tech world to more of really advocating for women at this stage of their life. And I'm really excited to have her on because I feel like she has so much to offer, especially during this time in our life. And I know that we have talked to so many of you listeners that have that are in this time of your life or that are heading there, that are interested in learning more about what support is out there for you, what's being done, on and on. So welcome, Shannan. Thanks for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. This is wonderful. It's nice to be in a local space as well. And Janine, yes. You and I have spoken so many times around perimenopause, menopause coaching, just all things midlife. So it's great to share what I've been doing and some of my experiences in the space.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like, definitely the menopause is not a new thing, but it's getting a lot more attention. And I'd love to hear, as we talk a little bit about like the things you've seen grow and trends and kind of myth busters and stuff. But before we get started, tell our listeners how you got into this interest field. Janine mentioned you had a career kind of shift. So let us know a little bit about where you or how you ended up here.
Sure, I'm happy to. It's an interesting journey, but as I've talked to more and more women, I'm not alone in my journey. I was in the high-tech space for 20 plus years, primarily in customer success, which is supporting customers after they've become customers. So everything in that post-sales journey was part of me and my team. So I think of this transition as kind of just another version of that in many ways. In late 2020, I was actually introduced to a podcast called Hit Play Not Pause. And at the time, it was, I started listening to it, and I'm just a consumer of information so much. And I started listening to this podcast, and the reason it was sent to me was the woman that started it was a big gravel rider, and I love to ride bikes, and I love everything wheels related. So I started out as just that. And as I started to really listen to this podcast, I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I was 48 at the time. It was during COVID. I felt like everything in my body was changing and transitioning, but I just thought it was COVID. Mm-hmm. I also have friends that are a couple years older than me that they were talking about hot flashes and this and, all of these different symptoms that they had. So I started really getting information for them at the start. And then even as I was listening to all of the symptoms around hot flashes, anxiety, depression, you name it, I wasn't connecting the dots to me. I was sharing it out to them, which was really interesting. But about a year later, I started a community event in a local networking group, and I had over 250 people that signed up to be interested in the group. We had about 40, 50 online when it launched. And I started with this theory that everyone wanted to, talk about like how they can be protected at work, all these different things they could do. And the reality was women just wanted their voices heard. Mm. They just wanted someone to recognize where they were empathize and feel not alone in this space and just share their stories.
And for people to not tell them they were crazy.
For people not to tell them they were crazy and not to just dismiss them as, oh, everyone goes through that suck it up buttercup or whatever other words are out there.
Yeah.
And that's all they wanted. And these women, we had people that hadn't even known each other it was a webinar at the time, crying and sharing and just the relief that they felt. And that really stayed with me. And in my head, I wanted to do something more local. So over the years that followed, I continued to just consume information. And the reality was so much wasn't in the U.S. at the time. It was still really UK-based and other countries. And it was starting to gain in conversation in the U.S. And I lost my job in August of 2024. And I was at a pivotal point where I said, I can continue to just look for something else, or I can really explore what this is. I kept literally when you talk about signs, when you talk about different things, manifesting, whatever you want to call it, it just kept coming back to me. I kept having people start asking me questions and just really entrenched in this menopause space. So I had worked with Mel Landon at the time, that was the owner of the Worklery. And I said, I really want to just throw this out there to the community and start a menopause meetup group. And that was November of 2024. And we put the first one out there. I was so nervous. I slow rolled it and just said, whoever comes, they come. I'm not making this big splash. And also, I didn't want to throw it out on a community page and have the words menopause all over the place. So we had 15 women come to the first meetup group, and it really was incredible. They just shared their stories. I put up a slide on symptoms, and they were like, wait, that's a symptom. I have that. And it just organically, the conversation just grew. And then from there, I started bringing in speakers to talk about everything from pelvic floor health to sexual wellness to nutrition to movement and all of the pieces that are really just holistic pieces of life, but that can shift or change in this midlife year.
Yeah.
I think I feel like I went through the same thing during COVID. I think my symptoms started, or my changes, for lack of a better word, started. I would like to see a study on women that started perimenopause during COVID. I really think we hit the perfect storm. It was, you're under all this stress. Your life is halted. I almost feel like we deserve to get those years back.
Do again.
Anybody out there agree with this? But really, while you were saying it, and I say this so much when I talk to people that are at our age range, that's when it all began. And it was it curtailed it, because you almost felt like, what is happening? Am I feeling this way because of COVID, right?
Yeah.
Or am I feeling this way for other reasons? And you almost didn't even think, oh, wow, I'm going through perimenopause. The timing was just perfect, right?
It's horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, and I turned 50 during those terrible time frame as well, right? And it was just well, you turned 50. There was no trip or party or,
Yes.
So just so many things compounded the way a woman felt during that time.
Yeah.
I really, really think that we should look into that a little bit. Maybe ours because honestly, I have so many things going on, still to this day, that I'm I wonder if that played a role in where my adrenals were, where my stress level were, how my foundations were, because life literally changed in so many aspects.
Yeah. Overnight.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting too, and I would be curious, the people who come to your groups and that you've just had the experience of either working with or learning from, because I'm 10 years younger, and I feel like it is so odd. Like, I feel like right now, like people my age, they're like in their like late 30s and they're like, I'm in perimenopause. Like every symptom is equals to perimenopause, like, you know? And so that's sometimes a little concerning because you're like, some of it could just be like, you're not sleeping enough or you're eating a poor diet or you're not moving your body. Like labels are a weird thing. I think it's important to like educate ourselves and to know like the science of the body. Like this is a stage that all of us will go through regardless. But I do feel like now there's an abundant amount of information, whether it's accurate or not, that I feel like it's something that you guys sitting there being like, I didn't even think I was in perimenopause, or maybe I didn't connect this to that. And then
now
years later, and now I feel like everybody's in it and anxiety is this or whatever is that. And so I think that that's an interesting thing to talk about too, because like the woman's body, it's, you know, studied very differently than the man's. And number two is there's a lot of questions. I mean, I remember when I had my kids and they were like, we don't really know what causes labor. Like, we don't really know. Like, so yeah, it could be perimenopause. It could be lifestyle. It could be in your 30s. It could be in your 40s. It could be in your 50s. Right. So how do you navigate when someone is talking to you? Obviously, we validate people's feelings, but how do you navigate when someone has a question for you of like, is this the stage I'm in?
Right. So there's so much to unpack there. Yeah. But yes, so I think it's every woman is different, and I think that that's really important to recognize that, you know, what you go through in your 40s versus someone else could go through at 35, or what that looks like. All of those things that you mentioned: diet, exercise, genetics. I mean, it all plays into it. And I'm not a fan of like, you know, I think that's the hardest part is everyone wants like, I'm feeling like this. What supplements do I need? What this do I need? And I think it does come back, the fix. And you want to come back to those foundations as you talked about. And, you know, from a perimenopause stage, there are a couple of things that you do start to look at to start to see, you know, if you're entering perimenopause. I mean, one is your periods. If you're seeing a difference in your periods, whether that be you're getting them more frequently or less frequently, that generally is your body's way of starting to trigger that you're starting to go through this stage of life. You know, other things can be if you are doing all of the things that you've been doing and something starts to change. So I can use myself as an example, and where I thought it was COVID or I thought it was working from home after for so long, all of a sudden, I mean, I was an executive in a high-tech company. I was having meetings where I'd have to present to, you know, my teams or to other stakeholders. I was getting on these meetings and I had anxiety through the roof, like cartoon character. And it was brand new. It was out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And it becomes like, what's changed? And if nothing has, then it's a little bit easier to say, okay, am I, you know, what are some of these symptoms and can I start to correlate them? And especially in perimenopause, they call it the zone of chaos for a reason, because your hormones are fluctuating. You can't, you know, you have estrogen, you have all these different hormones still, but they're fluctuating in a different way. And your symptoms can change. You know, one of the things that, I was talking to someone just recently about is so many people say, well, you know, I'm through that stage, or, you know, I don't know if I'm perimenopause, menopause, like they don't know where they are. But you can start to see there's different stages of perimenopause. There's, you know, early, mid, and late perimenopause. Menopause is a day in your life, like literally one day, 12 months after you've had your period. And then for the rest of your life, you're in postmenopause. The number of women I've met that say, oh yeah, I'm through that stage. Like I'm done with that. You're never truly done, but your symptoms can adjust and shift. So where you might have hot flashes early on, that may translate into something else later in your life. So I think it's being aware of yourself, your body, you know, and what has changed and what you need in different stages of life can certainly help.
Yeah. I think it's definitely like when you look at your moms or your grandmothers or whatever, and you think, I didn't know anyone was in perimenopause. Like I've been teaching group fitness classes forever. So like sometimes I'll like look at the sea of people and be like, all these people in my class were in like, primarily in these years. And like, now that I know so much, and that there's some women that truly suffer through this, and then it's uncomfortable for a lot of women that they're showing up. Our parents were showing up. Our grandmothers were showing up, and we didn't hear like an inkling of what they were experiencing. And so sometimes I wonder, and we talk about this a lot, has our lifestyle practices, which I know to be true, diminished for a lot of people with the increase of processed food, with the increase of stress, with the increase of all the things in our life? Do we not take as good a care of ourselves as we did maybe 30 years ago? And therefore the symptoms are that much greater. Our hormones are impacted that much more because of our endocrine system and all of that stuff. So the symptoms are screaming out of us. Or is it just because sometimes you're like, okay, well, it can't be that bad. My mom went through it and I didn't hear like a whimpering where like, you talk to your best friend and she's literally like miserable, like uncomfortable, stripping down in hot flashes, like depressed, anxious, ringing in your, like all the things. Have you been asked that question before? Like why all of a sudden does it seem to be like louder than it was 20 years ago?
So there's a couple of answers to that, and I would be remiss not to talk about the women's health study that was done in the the early 2000s, where they talked about estrogen being bad, and they correlated to cancer. And there's so much research out there. I won't spend the time in this conversation to talk about all the different areas in which that research went wrong. But before that, estrogen was being delivered to women. I don't think it was talked about as much, but there were doctors that were prescribing estrogen to women in this stage of life. After that study, that stopped. That became like there was a black box labels all over estrogen. Like the conversation stopped, and also the research stopped. The other thing I'll say is women have not been in research studies. They just started being a part of research studies in the late 90s, like 1995. So when you think about like all of these women before us, they probably were suffering. There's probably a lot of correlations to food, diet, all of the things that you mentioned. But we can also see that we have never had a good data set to really start studying women in any of these capacities. So I think a lot of what we're seeing is just education and it being for the forefront. Like, if you start to see all of this new data, you're like, wait, what about this?
Yeah.
Like even, something completely unrelated. I mean, there's now a women's crash test dummy.
Yeah.
That's brand new. I mean, if you
I know.
think about that, that's insane.
Things everything is made when you have like standardized things, they're all made for like the 5'10", 170-pound male.
Yeah.
Right? Like white male. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. Even like, and with that being said too, like even our standards in the healthcare system are, they're determined from this one pool. So it's so difficult. But I do want to say, growing up in, and a family where my grandmother, like old school, we didn't talk about periods. Like if you said to your father, I have cramps, like, your grandmother would nearly pass out. Like, my grandmother would hold her head and do the sign of the cross because I said I had a cramp, So I do think that played into that a lot, that they didn't talk about things.
Yeah.
And they may have been tougher at the same time, because this is what you have to do and this is what you have to go through as a woman.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like that just made me like sad hearing that, because I think, which I know is to be true, but just the amount of like shame then a woman attaches with like the natural things that she doesn't even have a choice. Like think of your daughters. I'm sure with Brian, your husband, they just, the tampon box will be on the counter. Like no one
tell them to pick them up.
Yeah. No one's
Go get
thinking about like, I need to hide this, or I need to like, this is an embarrassing thing. It's just like a natural thing that your body has. And I do think like we must, and especially women must have carried that with them. So thinking of the discomfort or the suffering or the confusion, I think like that must be scary, is like, I don't even feel like I'm in my body. Like, whose body am I in? And I hear that a lot from women, is that my first symptom is I just don't feel like myself. But then you have no one to talk to about it, and you're shameful from the doctor, or the doctor just is like, it's a stage. So when you meet people and they are in that confusing, maybe shameful, like, I don't feel like myself stage, what are some things that you feel are helpful, whether in conversation or tools, to help someone just like actually just put down their guard, to then be able to be like, this is normal. This is no one's doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
No, that's a great question. And it's, I think you nailed it. I mean, it's in women that I've talked to, that's the first thing they say. They can't articulate it more than, I just don't feel like myself. And that's generally when I talk about coaching, so the menopause coaching, I think I skipped that part in my story. We started kind of talking about different things. So in March of last year, March of 2025, as a result of both the meetup groups and just conversations I've had and just determining where I wanted to go next, I ended up becoming a menopause certified coach. And I took a program actually out of the UK called Women of a Certain Stage. And over that course of 18 weeks, you're learning about all of the different symptoms and all the stages of menopause, so you can feel like you can understand and relate. You're also talking about it from a coaching perspective, and then you're coming out with what they call a menopause plan. And the menopause plan, it's interesting because it really is around all lifestyle things, but what it's focused on is what your goals are as a woman. And so many start out with just that, like, I just want to feel like myself again, and they're not really sure what that means. And some of it, I know I can say for myself and for other people I've talked to, like, they look at it in a comparison component. Like, they'll say, well, I don't run as fast as I once did. I can't do this as good as I once did. And so they're comparing their new self to their old self, and that's a really hard thing to do regardless. So a lot of what we talk about is, what does that look like? Like, what does feeling like yourself mean? And we'll start out really simple with certain like little things, like just getting some habits being formed at the beginning, and then talking about like what their routines look like, what all of these different things. And just by giving them the space for the conversations, 9 out of 10 times they'll start to understand like what that means for them. Like that, I had one woman say to me, you know what, it's not about wanting to fit into my bikini anymore. It's feeling confident again.
Yeah.
And confident in my new, not what I was. So I think that becomes a lot of the conversations and those aha moments. I think where people start out is always around the fixes. Like, I need to work out more. I need to eat better. I need to have, what supplements do I need? What are those things? And really, as we start talking about it, it's empowerment again.
Yeah.
And that is so powerful, and so, I don't know, you just want to cry out at the end of it, because like, it's walking away with that, taking back control. And that is so much a part of it. And for what that means to each person is very different, but it's taking back that control and feeling like this is it's a new stage, but that doesn't mean it's a bad stage.
Yeah.
Would you say that, well, of course there's always the devil's advocate, right? And there's always okay, it's great that this has become more mainstream and we're talking about it again, but do you feel as a coach that there is a psychological aspect of this, and that like the more we're putting it out there, the more it's becoming the reason why I'm gaining weight, the reason why I'm feeling tired, like Liz said at the beginning, like not understanding that there may be something that you need to work on foundationally. And you and I have had the conversations about just thinking about the basics and understanding that. But like, do you think there's also the the part of the spectrum that there's now so much information and too much stuff, and we're looking for all the fixes. Because I know I have clients that are coming in and, I'm on this, and this because so-and-so on Instagram said that, and so-and-so on the news said this. And now it's like, it's almost, we're on the other side of it. Now there wasn't enough information. Now there's too much information. So like, how do you speak to that?
I think it goes back to the basics. And the way the menopause plan and the coaching works is you start out with that holistic approach. So we're talking about hydration to start. And I know that sounds so simple, but what it does is two things. One is, if you're not drinking enough water, of course your skin's going to feel a certain way. Of course you're going to look a certain way. Like, it really is just getting that hydration as the first piece of it. But what it does is it starts to say, like, okay, how do I start making those small changes and making those habits over time? How many times have you, I know I've been guilty of it myself, and I won't throw anyone under the bus. I'll use my own example. I can't tell you the amount of times I've said, I got to change my nutrition. And I mean it. I will grocery shop that week, and I will meal plan that week, and it lasts that week, and then I'm back to my old habits. So a lot of what I try to do in the coaching component of it is really saying, well, how important is this to you? Because if it's not important, the amount of time you're going to do it is probably not a lot.
Yeah.
So it's like, how important is it? What's stopping you? What have you tried before, and why hasn't it worked? And, do you need someone to be accountable? Like, do you need a different system? Like, what is not working, so that you feel like at the end of it, you have made a small steps towards it. And I think there's a lot of impatience.
Yeah.
Just in general. But I think going back to your point, Janine, as we start talking about like those changes, it really has to start with the basics. Like, when someone says, well, what supplement do I need? Or like, do I need to be on HRT? I say you need to talk to a doctor about that component of it. But you have to start out with those basics. Like, well, what isn't working for you?
Yeah.
Because if it's your sleep that's not working, then let's identify and let's work on like, why aren't you getting that sleep? Are you drinking before bed? Are you eating too late? Are you stressed out? Like, what are some of those habits that you can do? And I will tell you, 9 out of 10 women that I've spoken with, they want to throw meditation into their bedtime routine. But when we really start breaking it down, saying it and doing it are very different. So sometimes they'll start with, you know what? I'm going to put my phone and plug it in the farthest corner of my room so it's available for my alarm, but I'm not looking at it. So sometimes it's those micro changes that over time become. So I don't think that there is a magic bullet, and I don't think that every person is the same. I think it becomes starting where they are and what's most important to them, and giving them those wins along the way.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, I think of a lot of times, like as we age, our body, one, goes through changes. So your habits need to change. You have your foundations, but within those, how you approach those change as you change. So you do find a lot of people, I find a lot of my clients being like, I did this or I looked like this and now I don't. And to think, okay, well, if you're doing the exact same thing you were doing 15 years ago in terms of how you care for yourself, you might need to look at that a little bit differently. I also think that, our bodies go through, they've been used up more, so they're a little bit more sensitive. We think about like, when we were younger, if we went through a couple sleepless nights, we'd be fine. Now you have a bad night's sleep, and like, I wake up and I'm like, how am I gonna get through the day? Or if you are someone who drinks alcohol, you could have had a couple drinks and bounced up the next day without a blip. Now you have a glass of wine and you're like, why did I do that? And so that is also an equivalent to all the other things in your life, how you have to you have to be more intentional on how you care for your body the older you get, just because it becomes a little bit more sensitive, used up, however you want to think about it. And so that is a true thing. And then it collides with a major change. So those two things, in the way that I view it, kind of come together and almost give you a combusting feeling. Like your body, no matter what, needs more care. You feel it in your back, you feel it in your knees, you feel it. So lifestyle changes or lifestyle habits become that much more important. And then you wrap in hormone changes, and then you layer on motherhood. You're still in your career. You might have aging parents, all the things that go along with it. And it does feel very overwhelming. And so for me, I feel like anytime I go through an unknown period in life, an overwhelming period in life, education is the biggest thing. You know, you are only going to add to that overwhelming wave by just following action. Someone tells you what to do. I'm just going to do that. I'm going to change my nutrition. I'm going to do this. But why are you doing that? Why is that a fit for you? Why is that? And I think coaching, good doctor, reading books, finding people that you trust to learn about this stage, not just say I'm in this stage, can be powerful. So in your coaching, how do you find people receive and respond? Obviously, they're coming to you, so the want is really important. But how do you see the difference between someone who really wants to learn about it and someone who wants you to tell them what to do so they feel better?
That's a great question, and it's interesting because I think I have to differentiate that at the beginning of a coaching session that you're doing the work. I'm here to help prompt you. I'm here to, I have knowledge of the stage of life where I can support. I can also validate. A lot of times, a lot of women in the stage just want validation. Like, am I crazy? Is this the stage of life? But at the end of the day, my goal is to hold space and to walk them through the process and let them guide what they need during that time. Like they're the ones that are setting up their goals. They're the ones that are going to be held accountable at the end. I can support them, but I mean, think about the amount of times that someone has said to you, oh, go take this vitamin or do you just need to exercise 3 days a week. And you're like, yeah, okay. Whereas if you say, well, what's stopping you from exercising 3 days a week? Well, what would that take to change your schedule in order for you to do that? Well, what kind of activities bring you joy? Because so many people go, oh, they told me I need to do Zumba. And I'm like, I love to lift weights. Zumba scares me because I can't dance. But if someone if it becomes the conversation around what you love and then you're committing to it, that's so different than someone just telling you go out and exercise 3 days a week. What we're doing is saying, okay, well, if 3 days doesn't work, what does work? If Monday, Wednesday, Friday doesn't, what does for you? Or whatever that conversation is. They tell me I have to do it in the morning. I'm a night person. They tell me, whatever it is, it's allowing them to have enough space to figure it out and then start to execute it.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big difference in the coaching. And, the other thing that I'll say is so many women, they start out with what they start out, I need. And as you start to talk about what it is, like where they start out and where they end are almost always completely different.
Yeah.
So again, it's giving the space. And sometimes, I will at the end of a session say, you might want to read this book, or these are some podcasts, or I'll give them some additional information that I have either used or I know I trust, or, we'll talk about like what other resources could be helpful to them. But my goal in that is really being able to guide them in those directions, not really tell them what to do.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you have a lot of people too? This just prompted this question, like, when you get into these like just narrow times of your life, or the symptoms that you're having, and explaining to people that like this is not a one size fits all. Just because your friend is taking magnesium, or your sister-in-law is doing Zumba, or that doesn't necessarily mean that those are the things that are going to work for you. So same differences in the way that, and I love the way that you said you will prompt them, right? So same difference, like how do you take that into consideration, that the bio-individuality of everybody that you work with?
I honestly, try my best to just kind of meet them where they are. A lot of times it will be starting with, well, like if you have, it's like anything else. Like how many people, I'm not sleeping right, I'm not eating right, I'm not exercising, like you have all of these things.
Yeah.
So you can't, if you try to fix everything, you fix nothing, because you're like, okay, well, what came first? That kind of mentality, or I'm taking magnesium and this, and like if you have 5 different things that you're taking, you don't know which one is working. So a lot of what you do over time, or what I'm prompting is, there are certain, like, it's like habit stacking is what we call it, where you're starting with something, you're adding, they are adding on each week on one more thing. So you're getting the initial habits. Like, I'll use myself for an example. I realized when I worked, I had a bottle with me everywhere I went, and I had water with me at all times. And I stopped that when I started working from home. I had glasses all over the place. I had, and I wasn't in a consistent habit. So finally I'm like, wait a minute, I'm just going to buy a water bottle like I did at work and carry that around with me and make sure I'm drinking consistently. And then over time, that just became part of my routine. So then it's like, okay, now I'm going to look at what my exercise routine is, for example. Am I a morning or a night person? What types of things do I like? And then over time, it becomes you're layering on and looking at them almost individually, but you're habit stacking at the same time. Mm-hmm. But if you try to fix everything at once, it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
And it's, then it becomes like it almost is defeating the purpose. So I always try to meet them where they are and what's most important to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
You have a lot going on. I know you did a testimony at Congress for the state of Massachusetts.
The state house. Yes.
Tell us a little bit about what is going on in Massachusetts that relates to menopause and how it will affect women's health.
Yeah, so that's it's a crazy story, but a great one. They are, as we talk about menopause, perimenopause, we are seeing a lot of states take this on individually. So you'll see Rhode Island is a perfect example, where they have passed some legislation in the state of Rhode Island to give women in perimenopause and menopause more rights. And it really came about for a couple of reasons. One is, you're seeing a lot of women, I think it's a quarter of women, leaving the workplace in the time where they're thriving. And I can say I'm one of those women, where I was at I could say at the height of my career. I was a C-level executive that felt like they lost their executive functioning and lost their way. I felt embarrassed. I felt like I was forgetting things. All of the things that I started, that I felt like were just table stakes, became points of anxiety and points of fear for me. Mm-hmm. And I'm not alone. There's, a quarter of the population. So, there were 3 things that, from a state perspective, that they're looking at doing. And this is in Massachusetts. There's a new House bill that just came out, 4838 is the House bill. And it has 3 different pieces of it. The first piece is, looking at education within the healthcare community. I mean, we've heard if you haven't heard the statistics, there's one provider for every 30,000 women that can provide care and knowledge in this stage of life. Wow. And that's through the Menopause Society that, is looking at that. So the doctors get such small amount of knowledge in this space. The other is around public education, where we're fortunate. I mean, we live in an amazing town. We have access to resources. We're out there. But there's so many places, whether it be in just different parts of even within Massachusetts, that just don't have that same level of access that we have. So there's also that putting that public funding in place so that you can educate across all of Massachusetts. And then the last one is workplace improvements. So, what are some of the things? I mean, and I think of this similarly to, and we were in that stage as well, Janine, when we were pregnant, we were at work, we were looking, a lot of those pregnancy benefits weren't available yet, and we were leading that charge on that. I think menopause is the next charge that we're leading. So looking at, is it workplace accommodations? Sometimes it's things as simple as like fans in the workplace. Others it's uniforms, and just the material that women need. And others it's just working from home, or what are those accommodations that are required that leave women not feeling like their only choice is to leave the workplace. So that's what the bill is set up to do is, and this was stage one, where they were just looking at testimonies from different women to to say, this is something that is important in Massachusetts. This is something that we can support. I think there's 14 or 15 states that have already passed legislation on this. And then there's that next wave that's coming, and Massachusetts is in that wave.
Yeah. Wow. That's exciting.
That is exciting.
Just even like women's health,
becoming
whether it's
more forefront.
Whatever stage it is, breastfeeding spaces or pumping or whatever, that it's just, our bodies are amazing and unique and different than a man's. And if you're growing, especially I would think in, the office setting where women probably aren't as big of a population as a man, sometimes finance, whatever it might be, that it is even that much more uncomfortable, and lack of accessibility to be able to take proper care of yourself. One thing that I'm finding, and so, I think that, and then I'm curious, it's kind of a two-part question. One thing that I feel like physical symptoms are very overwhelming, hot flashes, not sleeping, but mental health side of it is something that, I'm learning more about when it comes to perimenopause. It's an area of life that interests me and that I'm connected to. And so hearing a lot of women be like, everybody has moments of anxiousness or feeling low, but it wasn't something that I quote unquote struggled with or had any issues with where I needed to think about medication or seek a professional. And then, I hit this midlife stage and I am paralyzed by anxiety. I am paralyzed by going over a bridge or getting in a car or having literally it feels like I can't live my life. And, that is super scary, especially if it's something that really feels like it came out of the blue. If you kind of have a toolbox of anxiousness or depressed, not that it makes it any easier, you're kind of like, oh, I know what this is, but just riding out and then having these really overwhelming feelings is so scary. And so when you have conversations with people more about that, less about maybe the physical symptoms, more about the internal symptoms, what are some things that people are saying and feeling as maybe leaders of their home, moms, cooking, driving, all these things, and not being able to really do them the way they want? What is some of that you see?
Yeah, I think that there's a level of overwhelmness that comes with that stage. And to your point, I think that there's a lot of trying to recognize where those feelings are coming from. I can say for my personal journey, I went to my doctor as I was starting to feel crazy. And that's what women are saying. Yeah. I feel crazy. I feel like I managed all of this and now I can't, cook a meal without wanting to scream or feeling like I have 10 things all over the place. And, you're seeing a lot of, from a mental health standpoint, you're seeing that anxiety ramp up. You're seeing women that now say I turned 40 and now I have ADHD. And it's is it ADHD or is it and there are studies out there that show that there are certain things that as a result of this stage of life will start to present themselves differently than they ever have. So they become more noticeable. But I know for myself, I went to my doctor. I put in the notes of reason for visit menopause, and she said to me, "Oh, well, you're eating, you're sleep, you're doing all the things. Nothing's changed, so you must be depressed." And sent me home with a prescription for Prozac. And I'm like, no, I'm not depressed. I feel situationally depressed right now. I feel overwhelmed, but I don't want to, like, I feel like in some cases it's making it worse because now I'm on something else and now I have to manage that. So I think, having, that space, like if someone had said to me, oh, you're going through perimenopause, one of the things that we are going to look at is your hormones and see if there is a need for progesterone, testosterone, estrogen in this phase of life, and at least explore that as an option, because there are studies that we're seeing where, sometimes if your progesterone's low, that can impact your sleep. If your estrogen level is low or varying, that can interrupt and make you feel anxious and depressed. So I think there's also that conversation, whether it's right for everyone or not, is a different conversation, but at least the ability to have that conversation needs to be part of our healthcare system. And I think that that's where women, again, HRT isn't a silver bullet either, but having that ability to have that, to have that conversation around what can help and not automatically go to an SSRI or an antidepressant, I'd love to see that.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And I think the other component is, it goes back to the education piece. Like I was at an event just recently and I was talking to a psychiatrist, like a psychologist that is in mental health. And she said to me after, she's like, I'd love to talk to see if we could do something together. I have so many women that I'm treating that, while they have, I'm treating them for one thing, they have all of these other components that, if they realize that they were part of this stage of life, maybe there's different ways or different support groups or different ways of addressing that. So I think, the community piece is outrageously powerful.
Totally.
And I think that circles us back to where we started, where that, when we started the menopause meetup groups, it was really about education, community, and storytelling. So having amazing speakers that I felt that I trusted to share this information, so it didn't feel like you were, in the world of Instagram and TikTok trying to figure it out yourself. Having that community of women to either go to or say, I'm looking for a doctor. Who have you used that you recommend? Or here's a great podcast. Here's a great book. Like, so you feel like you're not starting and you're not by yourself. And then storytelling's so powerful.
So powerful.
So powerful. Like when you tell your story and where you've come and one person nods and or comes up to you after and says, thank you, you just said everything I've been feeling. There is no better feeling than that, to feel heard. Yeah. And to not feel alone by, saying, okay, yes, that was my story too. Yeah. So I think it's all.
It's all intertwined. And I do think like you said, the storytelling, the education, even if you choose, let's just say the mental health, but physical health too, even if you choose to say, hormone therapy is not for me, or an SSRI or whatever is not for me, just knowing what it is. I've always struggled with anxiety since I was a child. And for so long, I thought I was dying. And once I really understood anxiety and the symptoms, didn't necessarily take it away, but I knew that was what's going on. So for women who might have these new symptoms, once they understand, okay, this is perimenopause, or this is menopause, or this is a hormone change, doesn't make it, but then it takes that component of what's wrong with me. That panic of do I have this disease? Do I have this? You can go down this rabbit hole. You can Google something, and all of a sudden it's my day's over. I'm a wrap. So I think just even understanding the stage that you're in, regardless of if you choose a medication or if you choose whatever, but that community piece that okay, I'm not alone. It just is. I would assume that it's very empowering, and then it also is these are opportunities for me to grow my toolbox in a way that I'm hearing from somebody in real life. I am not growing my toolbox from this general screen that I don't know if this person even went through what I went through. So, going back to that true community. I can talk to you, you can talk to me, we can sit over coffee. I think one that's really lost, especially after COVID, and then with the increase of technology. So tell us a little bit about what the meetup, like how often the meetups happen, how they've grown. Is it in person? Is it virtual? What does that kind of community look like?
That's a great question. And then after that, I'd love to talk about the technology piece as
Yes.
well.
And I don't want you to forget about the documentary as well.
Yes.
Yep.
So
We're all writing this down because we also all could forget.
Yeah.
So from the meetup standpoint, right now we have the meetups once a month. They are local to the Melrose community. I have a Facebook page as well called "It's Not You, It's Menopause." That it was an ask from the first meetup group so that people could come together. I'm still trying to figure out what that means from a community standpoint. We have about 275 women on the page now, and I think that right now a lot of people are similar to what I do. It's like that consuming of information. I know it's harder to share, your personal stories in that online community, which is really what the meetups were designed for. The meetups are once a month. They're now the last Wednesday of the month from 6:30 to 8 o'clock, and it's at the Leading Edge that is right next to Cafe Nero and right downtown Melrose. And we have anywhere from 10 to 20 people, depending on the meetup. We usually average around 15 people. I will, throw myself on the sword saying I need to do a better job of socializing it. But we generally have a mix of speakers. Every month tends to be a little bit different. We have everything from pelvic floor to movement to sexual wellness and HRT to sleep specialists. And I'm also looking at different areas and taking it not just menopause but midlife, career. So many people, like, that has been a topic that I can tell you probably 1 out of every 4 women, it feels like, is looking at what they want to do next, what that next stage is, or what they've left their job and now they're figuring it out. So that transition stage is important. Things like you had mentioned earlier, that sandwich generation. Like, it's the cruelest joke to have a teenager in puberty and going through like high school as you're going through the perimenopause stage. Like, it's just mean.
Yes.
So like, ways of dealing with that. So some of it is bringing in the right specialists for it. But then others is just, again, that sharing of the stories every month. So each month is different. I always post it on the Facebook page, and then I try to post it a little bit more in the community as well.
Yeah.
I have a website, or I have my own business website that I've started that I'm in the process of still continuing to build out that as well.
After you, and then we can talk about the other things that I already forgot about. But so you completed your certificate. You went back last spring, March, you said, 2025, for your certification as a menopause coach. So since then, since you've been starting to practice or working with clients, I'm just curious from like a business point of view, are you mainly right now working like word of mouth? Is there places that people can like search like menopause coach? Is there a database under that type of certification? Like, how do people find you if they need you?
Well, that's what I'm working on now.
Yes.
It's my social presence.
Okay. It's harder than it seems.
I started an LLC last year called Kairos Strategies. And the goal was, as I started to think about like where my intersections were, there were really 3. There was the coaching component and the menopause coaching that I'm building out, the community aspect, which is the meetup groups, and then the consulting aspect, which is I've been working with some startups. My background is startups to acquisition, and I love that startup culture, but I wanted to be more meaningful and more purposeful. So I'm working with women-owned and in women's health organizations in more of an advisory and startup role. So those are kind of the 3 pillars that I have been starting to drive home. So I feel like August of last year was when I was certified and decided that this was the path that I wanted to take. In October of last year, we created, and Janine was one of the people that was instrumental in making it successful. We did a local summit for menopause, in which we
great.
had it was amazing. We had 7 speakers, 15 vendors, over 50 women that attended, and we had no idea going into it what it would be, what the impact it would have. But for the most part, most women stayed for the day. Like we had an incredible spread for lunch. We had, but it was a way like we set it up so that the 7 speakers each had one of, if you think about that holistic circle, they each talked about one of those phases. So whether it be nutrition, movement, sexual wellness, pelvic floor health, overall strategies, even things like decluttering and getting your life back on track, like what you need to throw out and what you need to get rid of. Like it can be so overwhelming to have all these pieces in play. So, and then we had some amazing vendors that were there just talking about their services so that women felt like they could be supported in that stage of life.
Yeah.
So it was really, so my path, I feel like I'm continuing to grow out and, doing a combination of one-on-one coaching. I'd love to, and I've been starting to build out some material. I'd love to be working more with businesses.
Yeah.
I think that's where my true passion was to start, and where that's where I've been starting to build out. And I've been also building out what I'm calling my advisory services. So what I did in the past, I think with having that knowledge of midlife, looking at some startups that are addressing components of that. So right now I'm working with an organization that has symptom tracking for perimenopause and menopause, and they're looking at they have AI added into that so that you have support at 2 a.m. if you need support at 2 a.m. You can track your symptoms. So instead of going to your doctor and saying, I have, hot flashes, I might have anxiety, I had a headache, like you have a way of tracking it on a regular basis. So when you go into your doctor, you have data.
Yeah.
And I think data is so powerful.
Yeah.
And it takes it, I know for me, I started tracking. I've always tracked certain things, but it was like my running times or this or my exercise and everything. But I've said for years, like I'm a terrible sleeper, but I didn't know how much I was sleeping. So I started tracking my sleep, and now I'm able to start to see when the days that I'm sleeping well, the days I'm not. And then I can start to say, like, did something happen on those days? Like the app that I'm working with has a 21-day challenge for alcohol. I took it last month, and I could see like which days I drank and which days I never drank.
Yeah.
And then I could say, well, why? Like what's happening on those days? And then I could look at my sleep and say, did I have better or worse sleep on those days? So, the apps that are coming out and some of the information that's coming out right now is really helping women, track, to be able to not only track it, but then make recommendations on what you can do next. So I think it's a really good intersection of using AI and personalization of that, because it's starting to look at what areas you're seeing declining or increasing, and then trying to leverage the data appropriately.
Yeah, I think that helps also you advocate for yourself. So when you do go to a doctor, because we know right now, like good health care is very, hard to come by because there's just not enough practitioners. And then you have a very specific niche like menopause or perimenopause, it becomes that much harder. So that when you go to that appointment and then you're like, I'm just not sleeping well, or and they're like, well, you're just this. And then you go home and your questions aren't even answered, to be able to track and to be able to get data and to be able to like, whether you help problem solve it for yourself, or you just have more information to bring to somebody, a coach, a doctor, a nutritionist, or whatever, to be able to like really navigate your own kind of healing path or your self-care path or whatever that might be. I also would suspect that, a lot of times I'll go into like corporate a business or, you know, a nonprofit or wherever and do, you know, talk about nutrition or talk about movement or whatever, I would think that as businesses hopefully start to add more women's focused things, that people like you would have to go in and educate the people who run it on why that's important or how to roll these things out or how to communicate with their staff or, you know, maybe there's, I don't know. I just feel like that's a whole area because you can roll it out. But if you don't really know what that is, if you're like a CEO of a company and you're like, okay, well, this legislation passed, I don't know what to do with it. Exactly. Like to have someone come in and set up whatever that is within their businesses is probably a budding career.
Yeah.
And it goes back to knowledge. It goes back to education. You know, the first stage in anything is just being educated and then making sure that those around you are educated. If we're just educating women in their 50s, that's not where we need to be.
Yeah.
We need to be educating women in their, you know, think about how much better our girls are going to be as a result, and our kids. I mean, my poor son, you know, he's 17 and he knows all about another menopause event.
He's going to be the best husband.
I mean, but that will help him later on in life. And I think, you know, we talk so much about like the education of women, but there's another part of it that is educating those CEOs that are men, our husbands even.
Totally.
You know, there's a statistic that talks about, you know, the gray divorce and, you know, so many, you know, if they can get through the perimenopause stage, but if they knew what was happening and they could be more both educated and more empathetic as a result of it, then that helps everyone.
100%.
And I think that, you know, again, it becomes making those conversations just accessible and common knowledge. I mean, if you think about menopause, it's the one thing that you can guarantee that every woman over a certain stage of life or over a certain age is going to go through.
Yeah.
And so it's not bipartisan. It's, you know, like there's nothing other than this is one thing we can all agree, like we can all relate to.
Sure.
And
which makes it a big business.
It makes it a big business.
Right? It's like everyone dies. Everyone goes through menopause.
Everyone goes through menopause.
Unfortunately. But I want to say, I want to make sure I say this before we end, that you don't give yourself enough credit for what you did with that summit. You like to throw the credit to everybody else. You put that together. You did an amazing job with that. And I think you should be like so proud of yourself for getting through that first, if hopefully it is an annual event, because I think it was so well received and attended, but also this community group that, you know, for the local people, what you've done with that and how much network you've created for a woman going through this stage of her life. I think that you should, you know, be well respected for what you've done so far. I do want to finish with you just saying a few words about this documentary that you've been involved with in some aspect. So where should we look for it and what exactly is it going to be?
Yeah, so first, thank you. I appreciate your kind words around the summit and around the community. And I think that is really where I want to continue to get the word out. I had the fortune, last week of going to a showing of the M Factor 2. So the M Factor 2 was developed. It was by Tamsin Fidel, Denise Pines, and there's another woman whose name I keep forgetting. And it was a second session. They had the M Factor that was released about 2 years ago, and it was the first time that people were in a movie setting talking about menopause. The M Factor 2 is really talking about it from the standpoint of perimenopause. All of the the things that zone of chaos that we talk about, and just really starting to normalize perimenopause in more ways. And I had the pleasure of speaking on a panel last week with three other women, two of which I've been working with and in an advisory role, who have created an app for women in this stage of life that they're starting to roll out. It's called The Pause is the app, and it's starting to gain momentum. And the CEO was in the M Factor 2 movie talking about that intersection of data, why we need more research for women, and why we need more data across the board, not just for perimenopause, but to start to look at all of the different areas of a woman's life that start to change. Like we're seeing all of the different the different areas where women present differently, like cardiovascular, or where we see a higher or larger proportion of women in certain diseases. So part of what the perimenopause or the M Factor talks about is all of those different differences with women in that stage, but it also again gives that format for people to talk about it once again. So it was really incredible to sit on a panel to hear some of the questions that women were asking.
Yeah, such a great opportunity for you.
Oh my God, it was fantastic. And a lot of them were, the doctor related questions. But I think, where we come into it is what else you can talk about. We had the first question was from my husband talking about how can I support my women and my wife in this stage of her life. It was just, I think, again, it goes back to the more we have these conversations, the more information is out there, the more doctors get educated, the more people just start talking about it, the more we normalize this stage of life, then we can really focus on what we need to, which is the research and driving the right things within women's health. Like we're 51% of the population. This is not a niche. This is, we are, we deserve to have the research, and we deserve to have
the resources.
The resources. Thank you. I was
menopause
moment.
I know, right? I do that all the time. Liz picks up for me
I'm like,
every episode. I lose 5 brain cells or something. Yes.
Yeah, I love talking about this because I think, like you just said, we all have many women in our lives, being a woman, but also moms, daughters, friends. Like all these women around us have these unique experiences to themselves, but also very much shared, right? We have the similar body makeup. We're gonna go through something similar. Maybe it won't be exact. It will be different for each of us, but we can connect and relate. And to see this wave of conversation that's happening, and with any conversation, especially nowadays with social media, it's going to take on some lives of their own. But at the root of it is education, information, progression, some really awesome people speaking really loudly for women, women's rights, women's, healthcare. And I think that it is our responsibility. And so something like the podcast and you coming on and having these open, candid conversations without shame or embarrassment or, not feeling relevant anymore because we're past a certain age. I think that that's really important. And it makes me super proud to be able to do that and to have people listening and always, hearing from people saying, like you said, oh my God, I heard something that was helpful to me or something relatable. And at the essence of anything, an app, a product, a supplement, even like the best ones, the most helpful ones, it really is this simple, is just talking, sharing, being vulnerable, being honest, because there is somebody really close to you that's going through the same thing. It's awesome that you've created more space for more women to do that. It really is life-changing.
Yes.
So like Janine said, you should be incredibly proud of yourself.
Yeah. Thank you for doing what you're doing.
So when we share this episode and we share on Instagram, we will put where the meetup is, all of the things that you have talked about, even the documentary. Where can you watch the M Factor 1? the first one?
So
where's
so
the
it was
stream?
on PBS.
Okay.
I've had a few people say that they couldn't find it, so I'll try to find a link.
Yeah,
if
let us
it's
know.
Available.
Just I want to look at it, find
and
it.
the M Factor 2 right now is all private screenings.
Okay.
So they did that intentionally. So that we have private screening. I know there's another private screening in Boston. There's a woman that I'm working with that's doing one in Reading.
Okay.
So there are a couple of private screenings happening now, and then I believe the release is mid-March.
Okay.
That it will be available on PBS.
Okay.
As
Were
well.
we
Okay.
going to try and do a private screening?
I was trying. I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull it off.
Okay.
Because
Well, we'll
I can't
keep you
find
in
I
the
need a
loop.
location. So.
I know. I'll give you mine.
Okay. All right. So we'll talk offline. I'd love to do, I think it would be great to do a local one just because it's a great community building event. But yeah, I can send you all the information on that.
Yes. Yeah. We'll share that with you guys at home. Thank you so much for taking the time to come talk to us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. And thank you guys for listening. You can find all Shannan's information below and linked into the podcast, and always reach out with any questions. And if you have any specific questions for her, you can let us know or click. Do you have an Instagram page?
I have it's not you, it's Menopause Instagram page, and I have a LinkedIn page.
Okay, so we will post those and you can reach right out to her.
Yes.
Thank you guys.
Thanks, everyone.